When we think about self-improvement, we often look to the physical, cold showers, stretching, walking 10,000 steps a day. But one of the workouts that we might be neglecting is the one for our mind. Yes, the physical gym is important, but what about the mental one? In our day and age of doom scrolling, social media, phone addiction, perhaps the only remedy is the art of writing. Welcome back to Frugal Chic. My name is Mia, and you may know me as your financially literate bestie over on TikTok, but I've moved over to YouTube and I now have a newsletter because I'm diversifying. I made a video on TikTok talking about 5 things I do that have made me hotter, richer, and smarter. And they were sort of self-improvement hacks. And one of them was writing 1,000 words a day. And a lot of you were really curious about it. In fact, that video got almost 1 million views. But why not delve deeper into this, how you actually do it, what you write about? At the end, I'll be giving you some writing prompts. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly what I mean by saying that you should write 1,000 words a day. So 1,000 words, I feel, is enough to have depth without boring people. 300 words is a little snappy, you can get people's attention, you can get a thought across, but it's not very nuanced, you can't go into detail. However, if something is over 1,000 words, that becomes more of like a whole essay and, or a thesis or a paper, 1,000 words is more digestible and it's, one idea that you're just exploring. And I think that's why it's the happy medium. As much as I advocate for consuming educational content, I think actively creating something has a different effect. A lot of us are guilty of consuming self-improvement content. We read Atomic Habits, for example, and then because we've read that, we now think that we're good at habits. But it doesn't really work like that. Reading and learning are undeniably essential. Actively creating has a totally different effect. And when I talk about becoming a content creator or becoming a creator in general, a lot of people have issues with that because it's not very inclusive. I would say that writing is quite an inclusive thing that a lot of people could do. So writing is a habit that we sort of neglect after formal education. And we kind of think, okay, I don't have to write an essay anymore, so I'm just never going to do that again. But I used to think that only writers wrote, or journalists, or, people of that background. And while I did do English literature for A-level, so I have a little bit of experience in it, thinking about that notion, it's absurd. Not everyone that runs is a runner. Not everyone that meditates is a monk, You can still adopt these small habits that can improve your life. You don't have to embody that whole persona. So what do I mean by writing? There are so many different forms. There's microblogging now, or well, it's been around for a while, but things like X, previously Twitter, or Threads or Substack notes. These are like short paragraphs that you can write that can have very high impact, but they're much more accessible for, people working a 9-to-5 or someone with a very busy life. This is, I would say, your gateway drug into writing. You can start doing this daily because, how long will it take you to write 50 to 300 words? That could take you 5 minutes. Come on, you have 5 minutes in your day where you could practice this habit. Let's be real, I put 1,000 words because it's kind of clickbaity, but obviously this video is going to delve into the 1,000 words, but I don't want you to feel pressured that you now have to write 1,000 words daily. It's not that realistic for a lot of people. So I would say start with a microblogging platform because that is the easiest to get into. I did a little trial and I posted on all 3 of these platforms, X, Threads and Substack, for 4 weeks, and I tracked the performance. And with X, I got 0 followers. I got 0 engagement. A couple of people saw the post, but no one reposted it, commented. But then on Substack, gained 200 and something followers. On Threads, this was where I gained the most. I think when I went on there, when I wasn't really posting a lot, it was just automatically posting my Instagram posts. I think I had 300 followers and it's now up to 670. So I gained the most on Threads, and I feel like that might be the easiest route to grow if you are trying to do it publicly. Substack, I would say, is filled with just intellectuals, so prepare to have someone try and debate with you. But Threads is a lot more surface level, so I feel like you can kind of just get away with just chucking your random thoughts on there as long as they're relevant to your niche. So yeah, when I say 1,000 words, I feel like that's the end goal, not actually how you get there. You get there by creating a daily writing habit, which could be 300 words or 500 words, something smaller, because then you have to fall in love with the habit to have the end result. If you think about it, you don't suddenly wake up tomorrow with a 6-pack. It could take years to create your dream body, or you don't just wake up with 1 million followers as well. That's carefully crafted over time. So I encourage you to make it into a feasible habit that you can do every day. Okay, so here's why it benefits you. it's forcing you to articulate your thoughts. I feel that in our current society, I feel like there's a lack of intellectualism. I think that even myself, I find myself saying like constantly in sentences, particularly us Gen Z. Maybe it was COVID, maybe it was all these different factors as to why we feel we aren't as articulate as we should be. But I think this is something that really improves with writing, because you can do speaking, of course, which is going to help your speaking massively. But writing, you have more time to reflect, to research, to synthesize ideas. When you're speaking on the spot, it is hard to suddenly, get what you want to say across. But when you're writing, you kind of formulate your opinions, your ideas, and then it becomes easier when speaking. I have this theory that our thoughts are just fleeting. I mean, that's why I don't really believe in cancel culture or all of that. Like, yes, cancel people that have truly done something heinous. But when it comes to canceling someone from a thought or opinion, I think that's a little bit anti-intellectual, because our thoughts are just a mix of everything that we've experienced in life. Like, our worldview is shaped by every little experience we've had. We're sponges, essentially. I'm not advocating for like zero responsibility. I think people should be held accountable, but more so the fact that we are all exploring our thoughts and ideas, and our thoughts and ideas can change. And I think that not enough people realize that our thoughts are transient, and therefore I think that writing helps to consolidate what we actually think. Sometimes I get asked about a controversial topic and I might give an opinion, but then when hearing it back to myself, I realize that's not even my opinion. That's something that I've heard on TikTok, or that's something that I read in an article. Actually synthesizing your ideas and putting it in writing and consistently showing up is a way that you can build a kind of worldview. We might be forced to reach different conclusions or use things like literary devices to explain our opinions. Okay, another benefit is if you're a content creator like myself, it's a good way to like get into another medium and to kind of immortalize your ideas. Because yes, when you post a video, it's on the internet forever. I think writing or longer form content kind of outlives that, I think. A TikTok of 30 seconds or 60 seconds could have a shelf life of like a few months. A bit of writing could last a few years. It allows you to transcend the label of just being a content creator. There's nothing inherently wrong with just being a content creator. I'm proud of what I do. However, I think there's a lot to be said for people that are really strategic with the way that they diversify their income streams. It is silly in our day and age to just be on one social media platform. You have to diversify. Therefore, you actually have to learn other skills. Like, if you're posting on Twitter as opposed to Threads, it's going to be a different way that you structure your text. I went into Waterstones recently, and as a creator, I came from it through a different lens. As a consumer, I was looking at other creators who had written books. To name a few, Ali Abdaal and Gary Stevenson, I noticed that they had books. Obviously, I already knew that Ali Abdaal had a book because he's promoted it a little bit, but it just made me curious, because sometimes when we think about literature, we always feel like it's quite a prestigious or gate-kept area and not many people have access to it. It feels very exclusive. But seeing these other creators write books actually made me think that one day, who knows, but one day I might write a book. But I know some people's reaction upon hearing that might be, who do you think you are? Like, how dare you? You don't have a background in writing. But I think this is the thing. This is the age that we're living in. Everything is democratized with the internet. And I think that building a body of work, if you write 1,000 words a day, in a week, that's 7,000 words. That could be your first chapter. I'm not saying go write a book. I'm just saying that when you next go into a bookshop, be really strategic and actually look what books are selling, what books are people buying. Because when you do this, when you have this new like entrepreneurial lens, I think it helps with your writing. You can be an amazing writer, but if no one reads your work or no one clicks on it, then people aren't going to discover it. And I think there is an element of copywriting or, the sales of writing in writing. But I think there is something in that. I think there's something in commercializing, being able to understand where you sit within a market and, tapping into that. I think it's very, very clever. You have to have that level of thinking in order to do this. What I mean by this is I think that it had a different weight. As someone fairly new to the creator economy, I only started making content last June. I didn't really understand the weight that different platforms held. I just thought they were different, The difference between YouTube and TikTok, TikTok, you're not, you're forcing people to watch your content and you're trying to convince them to stay. YouTube, you're actually trying to gather people and actually want them to click on your video and to then stay and watch the video. So it's a completely different process. And I think that, 100,000 followers on TikTok could equate to 10,000 followers on YouTube. And that could equate to like 1,000 followers on Substack. It doesn't always equate to the same weighting. And therefore, I feel that if you're a fellow creator or fellow person that's interested in newsletters or an audience, I think that building an audience separate from social media by writing is one of the ways that you can not only stay in touch with your audience if that platform disappears, another way to build loyalty and have people actually invested in you and your work. What's the difference between writing and journaling? I saw someone on TikTok recently call what I'm talking about in this video as entrepreneurial journalism, and I really loved that. I'll try and find the video to link, but basically I think that that's what I'm trying to get across here, is that you aren't just journaling as a stream of consciousness or to be therapeutic. You're making something of value that you can give to other people. I'm sure if you're watching this, it's of interest to you, but I know some people are going to be like, well, not everyone wants to monetize their hobby. It could improve your life. If you're a creator, it can help you build a long-term audience. If you don't want to put yourself out there, don't want to show your face, it could be the one thing that you create, It's a lot more accessible than coming in front of a camera and speaking. So like I said, journaling is more, I think, to get your thoughts and opinions down on paper just for you. But when you're putting something publicly as entrepreneurial journalism, what you're doing is using a lot more skills, in my opinion. You're using copywriting skills. You're, maybe designing landing pages. I am so guilty of this as a creator that saw a little bit of success in the last year to just tell people to post their content. And that can feel a little bit insulting for someone that wants to start but doesn't feel like they can. It can feel like so out of reach. But I think that writing is such a more accessible thing than getting in front of a camera. So what do you write about? Because that is probably the thing that's going to keep you stuck. Since you're writing for an audience, you're using a bit of personal branding skills here, I would say. And no, you don't need like a fancy Canva deck of like your fonts and your colors. What I mean by personal branding is just understanding how you can be useful to someone else. And you may be thinking, oh, there's no particular niche or expertise that I have. I guarantee there's something in your life that you are very passionate about that you could talk someone's ear off for hours about. Maybe you don't have an outlet for it. I know that mine was finance and investing. I didn't know anyone in real life that liked that topic. So that is why I was so happy when I started posting content, because there was like-minded people there. I think you have to find something that's like that you've had maybe a childhood hobby or something that you're very passionate about or has personal meaning to you, and talk about that, but also do it at an angle where people can learn from it, make it educational and valuable. So tips and tricks, things that you've learned, mistakes you've made. You don't have to feel like you're an expert in the topic. I know it's controversial to say, but you don't need a qualification in what you're talking about. It depends on the way you talk about it. Yes, you can't give financial advice, you can't give medical advice, but if you come at it from a place of personal experience and you make it clear with disclaimers, and you also don't try to make it seem like you're coming across as an expert, that you're just another relatable person sharing their experience, that is totally fine. And I think that probably is why a lot of people are held back, because they feel like they don't have a PhD in what they're talking about. You don't really need to. I found that with the topic of personal finance and investing, when you're posting it online, you're reaching the majority of people aren't at that expert level, so they don't need someone at that expert level. They can go and read the Financial Times if they need that. They just want someone that is relatable and can explain things simply. I think the key thing that I've seen success with so far is dropping in your personal experiences. It's all very well talking about a topic, educating people, or talking about a hot take or something, but if you don't drop in something that you've learned or a personal experience from your own life, then it's really hard for someone to connect to it. It's very much like, okay, ChatGPT could have written that. With this age of AI and the fact that we're able to replicate content so easily, I think the gold dust in, content and everything is having an authentic experience, and you can't really fake authenticity. I think you have to just tap into it. Everyone has it, but it's about being vulnerable. It's about, sharing your experiences. Okay. Onto some writing prompts. I'm gonna just read them off my laptop here. But what transformation have you undergone and how did you get there? Mental or physical glow up? Spill it all. I love this one because everyone on social media loves the transformation. If you look at your Instagram explore page, you will see tons of side-by-side photos. If you can convey that something will have a great effect on someone's life, it is a very compelling thing to read. Number 2, hot take. What is something controversial that you think or believe that only you can really explain in a long form setting? I think sometimes on short form people rage bait and they just say hot takes, and yes, that boosts engagement, but if you really want to get a thought or opinion across, I think that long form, particularly newsletters and writing, is one of the only ways to do that. Think about an area of expertise that maybe took you years to master. What would you tell someone starting? This is what I try to do on my TikTok is, explain my savings journey, explain my investing journey, but hopefully make people that are just starting out reach my goals, but 10 times quicker. It took me 6 or 7 years to get to my savings level, everything. If I can share this knowledge with someone else that's just starting out, maybe even in a better financial position than me, they can do even better because they know what I know. And the last one is, if you could convince your close friend to take up one life-changing habit or mindset shift, what would it be? I really like this one because there's a lot of things to it. If you're focusing on talking to your best friend, it's actually really helpful because I think that that's the most engaging content when you feel like you're talking face-to-face with someone, kind of like the FaceTime effect. Also, like the first prompt, you're talking about a life-changing thing that you did, so you're really trying to share value, share something that you learned. It doesn't even have to be particularly amazing. It should be like one small change that maybe made your life more convenient. So here is a framework that I follow for my writing. I start with a hook. I know that a lot of content starts with hooks, but this just is the case for the age that we're living in. If your newsletter is on Substack, for example, and it's a post, the first thing that people are going to see is the title and the thumbnail. So make them relevant to your branding, but also something that's intriguing. Your title could be something controversial that you then debunk later in your article, but the point is that person may be mad about the title, but they've read the article, so you've got a viewer. Number 2 is deliver promises. I think people love to have structure. Like the start of this YouTube video, I told you what exactly we were going to be going through and gave you a promise that at the end you'd understand. And they often watch or read until the end because they want these promises to be fulfilled. We obviously deliver value, deliver educational value, or, with your transformations, your hot takes, make people feel seen. The option for this one is endless and it's really vague, like just deliver value, but I think you'll know when you start writing, is this useful for someone else? You might find it really interesting, but how can you structure it and package it so that it is interesting for someone else? And finally, you want to finish with action steps. People love actionable steps, like I've just done now, if you noticed. Especially if you're writing a newsletter, a lot of people, especially if it's a newsletter, a lot of people will not read it word for word, they will skim over it. And so you have to make it skimmable. You have to have action points at the end. So if they don't end up reading the whole thing, they still feel like they've taken away value, not just chunks and chunks of paragraphs. So the action points for this video are: start small. As I said at the beginning, you don't have to write 1,000 words. Write once a day, whatever feels feasible for you, but make sure you're consistent with the same amount of words. I just feel that that's the best way to build it into a habit, is to do the same thing every day. Step 2 is have the goal of creating value for others. It's not just about what you enjoy, or if it is, it's about packaging it so that it's attractive for other people. I strongly believe, controversially, that anything can be interesting. Once you get that ability to make the mundane seem interesting or seem emotional, that's when you have true power. The third thing that I'd recommend is by promoting your writing on social media, whether it's creating like a cute graphic, getting ideas from Canva, using a template, and maybe making a separate Instagram account so that you can keep your viewers up to date with, articles that are coming out or just your personal branding. One of the best hacks that I wish I did way sooner is offering a free digital download, like a guide or an ebook. What you're doing is making a lead magnet. Someone will have to give you their email so that they can get the free product, and then in exchange you're getting their email. You're adding them to your email list. So you can build up thousands of emails by doing this, and very quickly it would be easy. If you wanted to monetize with it, you could. So the key ethos behind Frugal Chic is to pursue hobbies outside of consumerism, and I think writing is one of the perfect ways to do that. If you want to see an example of some of my writing, you can head to frugalchic.co.uk to read it. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss out on further videos.